Welcome back. We are officially 9 weeks into the SOS 20-week live challenge. And if this is your first time joining us live, let me tell you quickly why we are here. You see, I spent over 30 years on the other side of the table, evaluating proposals, managing 143 billion in federal contracts, and watching businesses win big or fall apart before they ever got started. And the pattern that kept showing up had nothing to do with talent. It was structure, systems, revenue strategy, and readiness. The most capable business owners were the ones quietly struggling, not because they couldn't do the work, but because their business wasn't built to hold the growth they was actually chasing. So, I said, okay, let me just do something about it. So we started this on the 8th of April, I think, going live at 2 p.m. every single Wednesday for 20 straight weeks. That's what I decided to do. One topic, one teaching moment, one shift per week. And today is week 9. So we're getting ready to just dive right on into it. But before we get into today's topic, what I want to do is ground in what is moving from a policy plus perspective, right? Because today's topic on understanding what the contracting officer want is going to land different once you see what happened to one of the biggest federal contractors in the country this past week. So the first thing, straight out the gate, IBM just paid the DOJ $17 million to settle DEI-related findings on their federal contract. Now, this was announced May 27th. IBM, $17 million for DEI practices that the DOJ determined violated federal contracting rule. This is the FAR 52222-90 enforcement environment that is becoming real. So if IBM, with their entire legal and compliance army, got hit for 17 million, what do you think is happening to small businesses who have not even read, the actual new clause? And so this is not theoretical, as we have been saying week after week. This is happening now. Leading straight into the 52222-90 clause, that modification deadline is now just 51 days away. July the 24th. And yes, I'm going to beat this drum because I need everyone to be mindful of this here. Litigation challenging the executive order 14398 is pending in the U.S. District Court for the District of Maryland. But as the legal community has confirmed this week and has repeatedly said, that litigation does not pause your compliance obligation. So the clause is live. The deadlines are real. And so the DOJ has demonstrated, again, through IBM, that it will act. So if you refuse a bilateral modification, the agency can terminate your contract for convenience. So just be mindful of that. The third thing is the SBA expanded its small business financing capacity. So effective July the 4th, that's 31 days from now, is it? Okay, for those mathematicians out there. So on May 18th, what happened, the SBA announced that qualified borrowers who secure a 7A loan first can now access, up to $5 million through the 7A program and up to $5 million through the 504 program for a combined total of up to $10 million in SBA-backed financing. So if you have been waiting for that working capital to compete for larger federal contracting opportunities, this is a policy change that you may want to study. And again, it will become effective July the 4th, 2026. So talk to your counsel, talk to your CPAs, go see, is this something that can benefit you? The fourth thing is the DFARS FOCI proposed rule comments. Again, they are due July 6th. This is 1 month away. Again, we have 37,000 contractors that are otherwise impacted by this, and 21,000 of them are small businesses. So if you do business with DoD on non-commercial contracts over $5 million, your comment matters. So please go to regulations.gov, search on the docket DFARS case 2021-D11, and document your comments before the closing date. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about from a policy perspective today is the House Armed Service Committee marks up the FY27 NDAA tomorrow. And so what you need to be mindful of that is that HR 8800, that is the acquisition reform language, is in its early drafts. And this is the bill that shapes the next year of defense contracting policy. So be sure to watch it. So I want you to drop a 1 in the chat if any of those 5 updates were new to you, especially the IBM settlement. And then I want you, because again, I just want to see who is tracking this in real time. So as stated earlier, again, I spent over 3 decades on the government side of the table. You know, I was the person reading your proposal. I was the contracting officer scoring your submission. I sat on the source selection board and sometimes was the source selection authority. And I want to tell you something that right now that most business owners never get the chance to hear directly from someone that have sat in that seat. Most proposals do not lose because the company is not capable. Again, they lose because the offer was answering the wrong question. They answered, what do we do, when the solicitation was asking, how will you perform this scope of work on this schedule, under these terms, and with this past performance? And that is a completely different question. And here is what I want you to hold in your mind as I go through and do some teaching today. IBM got hit for $17 million because they did not give the contracting officers and DOJ reviewers what those evaluators were specifically required to verify. Same principle, different states. So whether you are writing a federal proposal or responding to an RFI or building the compliance documentation that protects you under 52222-90, you have to understand what is being evaluated and answer that exact question traceable to the exact criteria. Does that make sense? And so today I'm going to give you the contracting officer's lens, because the real problem becomes this fundamental disconnect that in most federal proposals is that the offerer is writing from their perspective. You're trying to tell me, how you feel and what you think and what you do and what their company does, their capabilities, their story. But the contracting officer and the source selection panels evaluate from the government's perspective. Again, the statement of work, the evaluation criteria in Section M, the agency missions requirements, and the risk to the government if the wrong vendor wins. That is what they're evaluating too. They're not that they don't care about your story, but guess what? They don't care about your story. They really don't. They want you to respond to what they're asking you to respond to. And so these two perspectives are not automatically aligned. And when you do not take the time to translate your capability into the language of the solicitation, you lose. It's just that simple. So, and I have sat in source selection boards. I have read past performance questionnaires. I have evaluated technical volumes against Section M criteria. The pattern is always the same. Offerers who win understand the contracting officer's job better than offerers who lose. They write to the evaluation criteria. They map their capability to the statement of work or the PWS performance work statement line by line. They make the contracting officers and everybody else on that source selection board documentation easy to defend if a competitor protests. And in 2026, the contracting officer's job has gotten harder and more specific because under FAR 52222-90, contracting officers now have to go verify additional compliance criteria before award and before modifications. So under the IBM precedent, agencies are watching DEI-related practices and past performance. The contracting officer's checklist is changing. So if you are still, writing the same proposal you wrote 2 years ago, you are answering yesterday's questions. And trust me when I say you will not win anything. So ask yourself, and I'm asking, have you ever submitted a federal proposal without doing a full Section L and M analysis first? Just type honest in the comments. Again, this is a no judgment zone. This is more common than you think, so don't feel bad or feel like it's just you, because it's not. Because the truth of it is COs or contracting officers, at the end of the day, they're actually not your audience. The evaluation criteria in section M are your audience. That is what you all should be writing to. So when I scored proposals, I was not free-forming my opinion. Again, I had specific criteria. I had specific point values. I had specific questions I was required to answer about each section. So the winning proposals address every single criterion clearly, specifically, traceably. They made my job easy. They gave me defensible language I could directly input into the source selection decision document. So your job as an offerer is to make the contracting officer's job easy. That's how y'all win. Make our jobs easy, or their jobs easy, because I done left the room. But make it impossible to score you low because you left no room for ambiguity. Make it impossible to be successfully protested because every evaluation finding is traceable to your proposal text. And in 2026 specifically, your job is also to make the compliance reviewer jobs easier. The contracting officer verifying whether you meet 52222-90 needs to be able to find your compliance documentation without hunting for it. The FOCI reviewer, if the DFARS rules finalizes, they need to be able to find your beneficial ownership disclosure without a follow-up data call. That is the new evaluator. That is the new criteria. Make it findable, make it traceable. So one of the things I want to do is pull the curtains, not just back on what I did as a CEO, but I want to pull the curtain back. Today, I want to take a minute because most offers, again, you're right into like one imagined single reader. And so there's not just one person looking at all of this. There's actually a full team on the other side of that table. And knowing who they are, again, changes how you write. So I want you to reframe how you think about this here. You're not writing to one imagined person. There are several people that are going to be looking and scrutinizing, your proposal as it come in. The first person, one of the persons, a part of this is your source selection authority. And you're here to term the SSA. This is the person who makes the final award decision and signs the source selection decision document. Now, in most of my career as a CEO, I was also the SSA. And that is the default, for Part 15, unless the agency appoints someone else. On larger, more complex acquisition, the agency will appoint a separate SSA. When I did the Community Care Network contract, eventually they appointed an SSA that was an expert from the field in that area. So it's a single procurement, actually it's a senior hospital executive that was appointed as the SSA. That's their playground, that's their yard. They understand what is required. So they were the SSA. So, but either way, the SSA is the one who has to be able to defend the award if it gets protested. So everything that reaches them has to be defensible. And yes, the SSA is also responsible for reading all those proposals that are evaluated as well. So don't think that their role and their function is done in a vacuum or a tunnel. It is not. Then you have the Source Selection Evaluation Board, or you will hear the term at the SSEB. This is the team doing the actual technical and management scoring of your proposal. They are subject matter experts. They're going to be pulled from the program office, pulled from the field, throughout an agency or organization, but sometimes they're also augmented by outside technical advisors, but they are the team that is evaluating your technical and your management, scoring your management proposal. They score against the factors and sub-factors in section M, and they document your strengths, your weaknesses, significant weaknesses and deficiencies, as well as risks. Their consensus report goes up to the SSA. This is the audience most offers, you actually completely underestimate. They're the ones that are reading your technical volume line by line, looking for traceability section L and section M. If they cannot find your response to a stated criteria, they cannot give you credit for it. It is just that simple. And the SSA cannot override what is not in the actual record. So you cannot hope for, Hail Mary once they get to the SSA. If it's not there, it's just absent. So be mindful that their roles and their jobs are very serious, and they take it very serious. Then you have the contracting officer. Again, I ran the source selection. I made sure the process followed for Part 15. I issued the solicitation. I held the discussions if discussions were authorized. I made the responsibility determination, and I signed the contract. The contracting officer is the one enforcing fairness, documentation, and procedural integrity. We are also the ones who will see your proposal challenged in a protest, and we want it to hold up. At the end of the day, everybody wanted to hold up and to win. And then you have the price or your cost analyst. Often a separate person or a team evaluating cost realism, price reasonableness, and for cost reimbursement contracts, the cost realism analysis is actually done. So they are reading your price volume against, again, the statement of work or the performance work statement and the technical volume. And based on how it's been communicated in the requirement, it would be evaluated to see if your numbers actually support what you said you would be able to do. And then we have legal counsel. Legal is reviewing every step for compliance with the FAR, the agency supplement, and emerging requirements like FAR 52-222-90. Legal does not score your proposal, but legal can stop an award if the documentation does not support what it is that someone is making a recommendation for award. So again, legal is there throughout that whole process, making sure that we are compliant, making sure that whatever emerging requirements that pop up, they're making sure that we are doing things by the books and according to the regulation, and they're making sure that there's a legal, sound, defensible award recommendation that is going up for the SSA review. They are our advisors. So here's what that means for you as the offeror. You are not writing one document for one reader. You are writing a technical volume for the SSEB, a price volume for the cost of price analyst, a past performance volume that supports the SSE's, the Source Selection Evaluation Board's risk assessment, and a complete record that the contracting officer and SSA can defend in a protest. Every volume needs to be self-contained and traceable to the criteria it will be scored against. And that is the lens. So now let me show you how to write into it. And I did feel that you understanding that team makeup was extremely important, because sometimes, you don't know what's happening behind the curtain. So, hey, we just went and find out who Oz is, right? So check this out. I want you to start thinking like a contracting officer. And I am applying each one of the 2026 GovCon environment. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 different things. And again, I'm applying each one of them to the 2026 GovCon environment. First, I want you to map your proposal directly to Section L and Section M, one-to-one. And I know most of you have heard the terminology compliance matrix, but there very well may be someone new to GovCon altogether and don't know anything. So I'm teaching from that perspective. But before you write a single word, take the solicitation and list every requirement in Section L. That's your instructions to offers. And every criteria in Section M. Those are your evaluation factors. Then I want you to build your proposal around those exact requirements as your outline. Every section you write should be traceable to a Section L instruction and a Section M criterion. If Section M says they will evaluate management approach, again, dedicate a clearly labeled section to management approach. Don't bury it inside of your technical narrative. Name it. Number it the way, they numbered it. Make it findable in 30 seconds. And in 2026, if the solicitation reference FAR 52-222-90 compliance, address it head on with your documentation, your policy language, your training records. Do not leave the contracting officer wondering whether you are compliant. That uncertainty actually creates protest risk, and they will not, award to you. You just approach everything, be straightforward. Approach it straight out. Don't try to hide anything. The second thing I want you to do, I want you to quantify your past performance and your proposed outcomes. Contracting officers trust numbers because numbers are defensible in a source selection decision document. Claims about significant experience or proven performance mean nothing in a scored evaluation. How many similar contracts have you performed? What was your CPARS rating? What was your on-time delivery percentage? What was your cost variance? If you do not have the metrics yet, that is a problem to solve before you submit. But it also means you need to start measuring now so that you know your next proposal can be evidence-based. And especially for the new SBA 7A Plus and 504 pathway effective July the 4th, if you're going after larger contracts that require working capital, the lender is going to evaluate your debt service coverage ratio, your revenue trajectory, and your contract pipeline. So again, you need to start gathering those numbers and have that information readily available, because again, we're 31 days away from that. So what regardless of the narrative, regardless of whatever you are responding to, again, always have your documentation, always be able to quantify it, always have it, let it be something that's easily traceable, and you have those source documents to verify and validate what it is that you're saying. And then the third thing I want you to do is address risk to the government head on before they raise the question. Contractor officers think in terms of risk to the government. Will this vendor perform? Will they deliver on time and on budget? Will they expose the agency to protest or compliance liability? Every proposal has weaknesses, and experienced evaluators will find them. So the worst thing you can do is pretend they do not exist. The best thing you could do is to acknowledge the potential risk and show your mitigation plan. That level of self-awareness signals maturity, actually, and reduces perceived risk for more than a perfect sounding proposal that ignores obvious challenges. And here is the 2026 version of this rule. If you have foreign ownership, any prior compliance issues, and DEI related programs that may trigger FAR 222-90 scrutiny, address them with documentation and a mitigation plan. Do not wait for the evaluator to find them and assume the worst. IBM did not get to 17 million by being transparent. They got there by getting found. And so we need to be mindful of that. So tag someone in the comments who is currently working on a federal proposal, a task order response or a teaming agreement. Again, this framework could change their outcome. So this is exactly, why the SOS conversion exists. We bring together federal contractors who are serious about proposal readiness, compliance readiness, and operational readiness. And we work through this together. We bring in those experts that are really going to pour into you. And again, it's something we work through together, not as a theory, but we are doing it in practice, right? And with this SBA financing expansion 31 days out, the FAR 52-222-90 modification deadline 51 days out, and your the DFARS FOCI comment window 33 days out. If that gets approved, readiness is not a future concept anymore. It is this quarter. It is right now, and so that is what we have to be mindful of. So I want you to drop evaluator in the comments, and I will make sure you get connected to the next steps as it relates to this SOS convergence with the specifics on that. And, drop brief if you want the weekly regulatory snapshot so that you can stop trying to track all of this yourself, or you can grab it directly. There should be a link, in the notes or in the comments here, but it's https:// acute-elegant-llc.kit.com/713C71B566. Again, this link should be in the description of this live post and or in the previous comment that I posted earlier, letting you all know that we was going to be showing up here at 2:00. But after this is over, we will make sure that this is posted in one of the comments up underneath of the feed. So again, you do not need a better company story. Not that we don't care about it, but they don't care about it. You just need to tell your story in the contracting officer's language. So again, map it to the solicitation, make it traceable to the criteria, and make it defensible in the source selection decision. That is all you have to do in order to increase the likelihood of your success, as it relates to winning contracts or winning the proposals that you're submitting. Again, we're 9 weeks in. Y'all, we're building this stuff together. And so I will see you next Wednesday at 2 p.m. So thank you so much for being here with me on today.